like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
So, just a few days before Christmas, a really horrific crime in New York City made headlines.
Yeah.
A woman was set on fire.
Oh, wow.
And killed on a subway train. And we've got some news articles with all the details of the event, the arrest, and some initial reactions.
Right.
We're going to deep dive into this story with you today.
Yeah, this is one of those that, it really makes you wonder about public spaces, especially in a city like New York where everybody takes the subway.
Right. And this happened early, too, around 7:30 a.m.
Oh, wow.
at the Stillwell Avenue station in Coney Island.
Okay.
And it sounds like a particularly disturbing attack.
The police commissioner was saying that the suspect was incredibly calm.
Really?
Like methodical almost in his actions. And it seems like the victim was asleep when it happened.
Oh, gosh.
Which makes it all the more tragic.
Yeah, the idea that this might have been planned out in advance,
and
the victim was caught completely unaware.
Right.
It's just horrifying.
Yeah.
It sounds like the whole thing was caught on body cameras, too.
Well, body cameras are becoming more and more common. And while there are privacy concerns, they can be incredibly valuable in investigations like this.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the victim and the suspect. Sadly, we know that the victim lost her life. Her name has not been released yet.
Right. The mayor has spoken publicly and offered condolences to the victim's family.
Yes.
And the suspect has been identified as 33-year-old Sebastian Zepeda.
So Zepeda is a migrant from Guatemala.
Okay.
He came into the U.S. illegally back in 2018, and he has very little criminal history.
Really?
No arrests in New York.
Okay.
And just one prior arrest in Arizona, but the details of that incident are unknown.
So potentially blank slate as far as we know.
Yeah, as far as records are concerned.
Right. But when they arrested him, they did find a lighter in his pocket.
A lighter in his pocket. Well, that's obviously a key piece of evidence linking him to the crime. I mean, this combined with the witness statements and the body camera footage, that's going to play a major role in this case moving forward.
So how did they actually catch him? It seems like things moved quickly after the attack.
It was a pretty impressive response from everybody involved, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, an MTA worker used a fire extinguisher to put out the flames.
Okay.
So that, preserved the scene for investigators. And Zepeda didn't even try to run away.
Really?
He just sat down on a bench outside the train.
Oh, wow.
And waited for the police.
It's just hard to imagine being so detached from such a horrific act.
I know.
But that's when the high school students stepped in.
Yes.
They saw Zepeda, and they recognized him from the photos
Right.
that had been released publicly.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. I mean, their quick thinking and willingness to get involved made all the difference.
Right. And then the transit officers apprehended him on a moving train without any further incident.
Wow.
It really speaks to their training.
Yeah.
The ability to handle, a high-pressure situation.
For sure.
So we've covered, the basics of the crime, who was involved, and how the arrest went down.
Right.
But what about reaction from the community? This all happened just days before Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, understandably, there's a lot of shock and disbelief.
Sure.
Especially given the timing. Witnesses describe the scene as chaos and horror.
Yeah.
With many expressing how deeply this has affected them.
Of course.
And one detail that really stuck with me
Yeah.
was the MTA worker describing the victim's clothes as being burnt off.
Wow.
That really paints a picture
It does.
of the brutality of the attack.
Yeah. And Mayor Adams, in his statement, called for swift justice in violent crimes. It's clear this case has touched a nerve.
Yeah.
And not just in New York, but before we dive into those broader implications,
Right.
let's take a closer look at some of their reactions
Okay.
and explore what they tell us about public safety in the wake of such a tragedy.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Okay. This case, it really brings up some tough questions,
Yeah.
about crime, immigration, how those things are perceived by the public.
It definitely feels like there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have this horrific crime, the tragic loss of life.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have the fact that the suspect was an undocumented immigrant.
Yeah.
It's hard not to see how that might influence the conversation.
Well, it's crucial to remember that, this is one specific case.
Right.
We can't let the actions of one individual dictate how we view entire groups of people.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to fall into that trap of making generalizations, especially after such a shocking event.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's also important to consider how this might affect people's feelings about safety, on public transportation.
I can definitely see how this could fuel anxiety for people who rely on the subway.
Yeah.
Every day, especially during those off-peak hours when the trains are less crowded.
Yeah. Makes you wonder how this event might shape future policy decisions, security measures.
Yeah.
Could we see a push for increased police presence on subways or greater reliance on surveillance technology?
Those are all valid questions, and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how things unfold in the long term.
Yeah.
But in the immediate aftermath, I think it's important to acknowledge the trauma
Yeah.
that this event has inflicted, not just on the victim's family,
Right.
but on the witnesses
And the entire community.
and the entire community.
Trauma can manifest in so many ways. It's so important to provide support and resources
Yeah,
for those who are struggling
absolutely.
to cope with the emotional fallout.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that support can come in a lot of different forms.
Right.
Counseling services, community outreach, even just creating a space for open and honest conversations about mental health and well-being.
It's about giving people the opportunity to express their fear, anxiety, and grief without judgment. But the ripple effects of this crime extend far beyond the immediate victims and witnesses.
Exactly. Think about the first responders who had to deal with that horrific scene, the MTA workers who had to clean up the aftermath, even the everyday commuters who were suddenly confronted with this brutal act.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that violence in any form leaves deep scars.
Scars that can linger long after the initial shock has faded.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another important point.
Okay.
The role of the media in shaping public perception.
The way this story is covered, the language used, the images shown, it can all have a profound impact on how people process and understand this event.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have the responsibility to report the facts. On the other hand, you want to avoid sensationalizing the tragedy.
Right.
We need journalism that informs without exploiting, that provides context without resorting to fear-mongering.
And as consumers of news,
Yeah.
we need to be discerning. We need to be critical of the information we're receiving and aware of our own biases and emotional responses.
It's about engaging with the news thoughtfully
Yeah.
and recognizing how language and imagery can influence our perceptions
Right.
and shape our understanding of the world around us.
It's about seeing the human side of the story.
Yes.
The individual lives affected the community, grappling with a senseless act of violence.
And even in the face of darkness, it's about looking for those glimmers of hope, those acts of courage and compassion
Yeah.
that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit.
Like those high school students who stepped up
Yeah.
and helped bring the suspect to justice.
Their actions speak volumes.
They really do.
Their willingness to get involved, to speak up despite any fear they may have felt,
Right.
demonstrates the power of individual responsibility and the potential we all have to make a difference.
It's a powerful reminder that we aren't helpless in the face of these events.
Right.
We can be vigilant, supportive, and active in creating positive change within our communities.
So where do we go from here? How do we move forward in a way that acknowledges the gravity of this crime while also fostering a sense of hope and resilience?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think there are any easy answers.
Right.
But I do think it starts with having these difficult conversations, with recognizing the complexity of the issues at play,
Yeah.
with listening to diverse perspectives, and with being willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases.
It's about understanding that there are no quick fixes, no simple solutions.
Yeah.
It's about committing to the hard work of building a more just, compassionate, and equitable society.
A society where everyone feels safe and valued regardless of their background or their circumstances.
Exactly.
It's a vision worth striving for, even in the face of immense tragedy.
And although this crime may have shaken our sense of security, it also presents an opportunity.
Okay.
An opportunity to come together as a community,
Yeah.
to support one another, and to reaffirm our commitment to creating a world where such tragedies become less frequent, less acceptable, and eventually a thing of the past.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
Exploring the details of the crime, the profiles of those involved, the swift response from law enforcement, and the ripple effects throughout the community.
We've wrestled with some tough questions about safety, justice, and the complexities of immigration
Yeah.
in a world that is increasingly interconnected.
And before we wrap up, I want to circle back to the point you made earlier about personal safety, especially for those of us who rely on public transportation.
It's understandable that people are feeling anxious about safety on subways and buses after an event like this.
Yeah.
And addressing those concerns is crucial. So what can we do? How can we reclaim that sense of security and feel more confident in navigating public spaces?
It feels like we're all a little more vulnerable now, especially in those places that are supposed to be part of our everyday routine.
Yeah, it's a natural reaction to
Yeah.
feel vulnerable.
Right.
I think rather than letting fear take over, though, we should focus on what we can control.
Okay.
Staying informed is a good place to start.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
try to avoid getting caught up in all the hype and the fear-mongering headlines.
Right.
Stick to reliable sources like the official safety advisories from the transit authorities
Right.
or law enforcement agencies. They'll have the most up-to-date information on any specific security measures that are being taken.
So knowledge is power, but what about practical steps?
Yeah.
What can we do as individuals
Well,
to minimize those risks?
it sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But being aware of your surroundings is one of the most effective things
Okay.
you can do.
Yeah.
Whenever possible. Travel in groups
Okay.
and trust your instincts. If something feels off,
Yeah.
it probably is.
Right.
Don't hesitate to move to another part of the train or bus
Right.
or alert the authorities if you see something suspicious.
But I think it's a good reminder to be familiar with the safety features
Right.
on our transit systems.
Yeah.
Where are the emergency exits? How do you use the intercom? Even having a personal safety alarm
Yeah.
can provide a little extra peace of mind.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the power of community.
Yeah.
Looking out for one another. Being a good witness.
Right.
Offering help to someone who seems vulnerable.
Okay.
These small acts of kindness and vigilance can make a big difference in creating a safer environment for everyone.
So it's about shifting our mindset from that
Yeah.
fear and isolation to a sense of shared responsibility.
Exactly. We don't have to retreat into our own little bubbles.
Right.
We can reclaim our public spaces by engaging with them thoughtfully and proactively.
This crime has shaken us all.
It has.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile life can be.
Yeah.
And how these random acts of violence can really disrupt our sense of safety and security.
But even in the face of such darkness,
Yeah.
we can choose to focus on the glimmers of hope.
Right.
The bravery of those high school students, the dedication of law enforcement,
Yeah.
and the everyday acts of kindness that remind us of our shared humanity.
We see resilience in the community,
Yeah.
the willingness to come together, support one another, and learn from this tragic event.
So let this deep dive be a catalyst
Yeah.
for conversation, reflection, and action.
Okay.
We can use this knowledge to empower ourselves and our communities to create a safer, more just, and more compassionate world.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.